Every morning, a young waitress served breakfast to the same lonely old man who sat in the corner booth. He wore the same worn-out coat, spoke little, and always left a few coins as a tip. For months, she showed him nothing but kindness, never knowing who he really was. But one morning, he didn't show up, and when his lawyers arrived with 4 bodyguards, everyone in the diner froze. What they revealed next changed her life forever. The morning rush had barely begun when Emily pushed open the back door of the diner, tying her apron with sleepy hands. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mixing with the soft crackle of bacon on the grill. It was just another day at Maggie's Diner, a place where regulars came for warmth. Not luxury, but for Emily. Every morning started the same way, by wiping down table 7, the small booth by the window. That seat had belonged to him for as long as she could remember. He always came alone, an old man in a threadbare brown coat, his gray hair neatly combed but his eyes distant, as if he was looking for something that wasn't there anymore. His hands trembled slightly as he stirred his coffee, the spoon clinking softly against the porcelain cup. He never ordered anything fancy, just black coffee and scrambled eggs. Always the same. "Morning, sir," Emily greeted with a gentle smile, her voice full of warmth. He looked up slowly, returning the smile with a quiet nod. "Good morning, young lady," he'd say, his voice soft and tired, but kind. That was their routine, brief, simple, but somehow comforting. While other waitresses hurried past him, Emily always took a moment to ask how he was doing, even though his answer was always the same: "Can't complain." Sometimes, she noticed him staring out the window, watching cars pass. Children hurried to school, couples laughing as they crossed the street. There was a certain sadness in his gaze, one that spoke of loneliness too deep for words. When the diner filled up with noise, clattering dishes, laughter, the hiss of the coffee machine, Emily still made sure to check on him. She'd refill his cup before he even asked, making sure it stayed warm. Most days, he'd quietly place a few coins on the table, barely enough for the meal. And every time, Emily would pretend not to notice. After all, kindness wasn't something she gave for money. It was something she gave because she knew what it felt like to have no one. Her coworkers often joked about him. That old guy must have run out of stories years ago. One would laugh, but Emily never joined in. To her, the old man wasn't just another customer. He was someone's father, someone's memory, maybe even someone who once had everything and lost it all. And though she didn't know his name, she knew his heart, quiet, humble, and kind. Every morning, when he walked out after finishing his meal, he'd turn back at the door and nod to her, that faint smile still lingering on his face. That was a small gesture, but to Emily, it meant everything. She didn't know it then, but that small act of noticing him, that simple kindness at table 7, would soon become the moment that changed her life forever. Days blurred into weeks, and weeks into months. Yet every sunrise brought the same quiet ritual. Emily setting down a fresh cup of coffee at table 7 before the old man even walked through the door. It had become their unspoken routine. She didn't need to ask what he wanted anymore. She just knew. Sometimes, when he entered, a faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips, as though her small act of remembering meant more to him than words could say. "Morning, sir," she'd say warmly, sliding his plate across the table. "Coffee's fresh today, just how you like it." He'd nod with that same slow grace. "You're too kind, young lady." "Thank you." To anyone else, it might have been nothing. But to Emily, those few words meant everything. She'd been working double shifts, trying to make rent, saving every tip she could. Yet, no matter how tired she felt, the sight of the old man, gentle, always sitting by that window, brought her a strange peace. There was something about him, something quietly dignified, even in his worn coat and cracked shoes. Sometimes, he'd hum softly while looking out the window, lost in a world only he knew. One cold morning, as snowflakes dusted the glass, Emily noticed him shivering. Without a second thought, she walked to the kitchen, poured him an extra cup of coffee, and slid it over. "On the house," she whispered with a grin. He looked up, surprised. "You'll get in trouble giving away free coffee." She shrugged, smiling. "Let me worry about that." That day, he laughed, a soft, fragile laugh that seemed to come from somewhere deep. It was the first time she'd heard it. From then on, she found herself doing small things, slipping him a muffin, refilling his coffee before the cup was empty, pretending a slice of pie was a kitchen mistake. It wasn't about pity. It was about kindness, the kind she wished someone had shown her when life got hard. Her coworkers noticed. "You spoil that old man," one teased. "He barely tips." Emily just smiled. Maybe he's already given enough. And as the days passed, she realized she wasn't just serving him breakfast, she was serving him comfort. The way his eyes softened when she smiled, the way he thanked her as if no one had done something kind for him in years, it reminded her why she loved her job. There were mornings when he seemed weaker, his hands trembling more than usual. Emily started pouring his coffee into a smaller cup, easier to hold. He noticed, eyes glistening. "You're thoughtful," he said quietly. She brushed it off. "Just doing my job." But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Kindness had become their language, spoken not through words, but through warm coffee, soft smiles, and silent understanding. And though Emily didn't know his name, she knew his soul. She didn't realize it then, but her small, selfless gestures were slowly weaving a bond, one that would soon reveal a truth more powerful than she could ever imagine. It was a cold Tuesday morning when Emily first noticed it. Table 7 was empty. The sunlight still spilled across the diner's floorboards. The scent of coffee still drifted through the air, but something felt off. The usual rhythm of the morning, the clinking cups, the shuffle of menus, carried on, yet Emily's eyes kept darting to the window booth. The old man's seat sat untouched. No folded newspaper. No steaming cup of coffee. No gentle nod from behind the glass. At first, she told herself he must have overslept, or maybe the weather had kept him home. She even poured a cup of coffee, anyway, just in case he walked in late. But he didn't single quotes T. By noon, the cup had gone cold. The next morning, Emily wiped down table 7 with extra care, smoothing the cloth across the seat like she was preparing it for him. Again, she waited. Every time the bell over the diner door jingled, her heart lifted, then sank as another stranger walked in. 3 days passed. Then 4. Maybe he found another place. Her coworker, Sandra, said gently while refilling napkin holders. Old folks like their routines, but maybe his family took him somewhere else. Emily tried to smile, but she couldn't shake the hollow feeling in her chest. She'd grown used to that quiet presence, the way his eyes softened when she greeted him, the way his hands trembled as he counted out coins. Now, the emptiness where he once sat felt louder than the chatter around her. One night, after closing, Emily stayed behind. The diner lights glowed dimly against the dark street outside. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down at his booth for the first time. From his seat, she could see the same view he always had. The crosswalk, the bakery sign across the street, the park bench by the corner where pigeons gathered every morning. Maybe that's why he liked this seat, she thought. It wasn't about the food, it was about the view, about watching life happen. She pressed her hand gently to the table, whispering, "Where are you, old man?" Her eyes stung, and she blinked away the tears. It surprised her how much she missed him, a stranger who had barely said more than a dozen words to her. Yet somehow, he had become a quiet part of her life. The next morning, she poured another cup of coffee and set it down at table 7 anyway, a habit she couldn't break. Her manager frowned, but she didn't care. "Just leave it," she said softly. "He might come back." But deep down, Emily knew something had changed. Days turned into weeks, and the seat by the window remained empty, a silent reminder of someone who had touched her life without ever trying. Still, she kept his booth spotless, the coffee hot, and the hope alive, unaware that soon, that empty chair would bring her face to face with a truth that would shake her to her core. It had been nearly 3 weeks since the old man's last visit, yet Emily still set a steaming cup of coffee at table 7 every morning. It had become a quiet ritual, a symbol of hope she couldn't quite let go of. That morning began like any other. The diner buzzed with the familiar clatter of breakfast orders, the scent of pancakes and bacon filling the air. Emily moved between tables with practiced ease, but her heart wasn't in it. Every time the bell over the door chimed, she looked up, expecting, hoping, to see that worn brown coat again. Instead, the sound that morning carried something different. The door swung open, and 4 tall men in dark suits stepped inside. Their polished shoes clicked against the tile, their presence sharp and commanding. Conversations in the diner fell into an uneasy hush. Behind them walked a man with silver hair and a briefcase, calm, composed, and clearly in charge. His eyes scanned the room before landing squarely on Emily. "Excuse me," he said, his voice even but firm. "Are you Miss Emily Carter?" Her tray froze mid-air. "Yes, that's me." He nodded once, motioning to the men behind him, who stayed near the door like silent statues. "My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm an attorney. I represent the estate of Mr. Henry Collins." The name meant nothing to her until he added softly, "You knew him as the gentleman who sat by that window every morning." Emily's throat tightened. Her voice barely came out. The old man, Mr. Brooks, gave a slow nod. "Mr. Collins passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks ago." The room seemed to still, the clinking dishes, the murmurs, even the sizzle from the kitchen, all of it faded under the weight of his words. Emily gripped the counter, her heart sinking. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Mr. Brooks opened his briefcase and took out a thick envelope, sealed with a gold emblem. "Before his passing, Mr. Collins left specific instructions. He wanted this delivered to you personally." Her coworkers glanced at one another, their curiosity barely hidden. Emily stared at the envelope, her name written on it in a shaky, familiar hand. "Are you sure there's no mistake?" she asked. "He hardly knew me." The lawyer smiled faintly. "On the contrary, he spoke of you often." Her chest ached with confusion. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she took the envelope. The paper was heavy, not just in weight, but in meaning. Mr. Brooks continued. "He insisted this be given to you by hand and asked that we convey one message. Tell her kindness never goes unnoticed." For a moment, Emily couldn't breathe. The entire diner was silent. All eyes on her, the waitress who had shown a stranger simple kindness. Now standing in front of lawyers and bodyguards holding something she didn't understand. As the men turned to leave, Mr. Brooks paused at the door and looked back. He thought very highly of you, Miss Carter. I believe you'll understand once you read his letter. Emily looked down at the envelope in her shaking hands, her name written in faded ink, and felt her world tilt. She had no idea that what lay inside would not only reveal who he truly was, but would change her life forever. The diner was nearly empty when Emily finally found the courage to open the envelope. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it echo in the quiet. Inside, there was a folded letter and a small silver key, its surface worn but polished with care. She unfolded the paper slowly. The handwriting was shaky but familiar, the same script that had written her name on old receipts and coffee tabs. Dear Emily, if you're reading this, it means my time here has come to an end. I never had the courage to tell you who I really was, but you were the only person in years who treated me as if I still mattered. Her eyes filled with tears as she continued. I once owned companies, cars, and houses, but after my wife passed and my health declined, all that wealth meant nothing. People disappeared, friends, partners, even family. But every morning, you looked at me like I was human, not a burden. Emily pressed a hand to her mouth. Her chest tightened as the words blurred through her tears. The key in this envelope belongs to a small cottage by Willow Creek, a place my wife and I built with our own hands before the world became so loud. I want you to have it. You reminded me that kindness still exists, and for that, you deserve more than a thank you. By the time she reached the end, she could hardly see the page. Please take care of the home, and let it remind you that even the smallest act of compassion can change someone's life, even an old man's. You made my last days brighter. Henry Collins. Emily sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. She could feel the weight of the key in her palm, small, cold, and impossibly heavy with meaning. Around her, the world kept moving, the soft murmur of a radio, the scrape of a coffee cup, the low hum of life continuing as hers changed completely. When she finally looked up, she saw her coworkers staring from the counter, eyes wide with disbelief. But Emily wasn't thinking about the house, or the money, or the mystery that had just unfolded. She was thinking about Henry, the quiet man in the brown coat, the one who had sat by the window every morning, just wanting to be seen. That evening, she drove to Willow Creek, the address scribbled neatly on the back of the letter. The road wound through golden fields until she reached a small white cottage framed by oak trees and wildflowers. The front porch creaked beneath her steps. She turned the key in the lock. It clicked softly, like the sound of a heartbeat. Inside, sunlight streamed through lace curtains, and a framed photograph sat on the mantel. Henry and his wife, smiling by that very same window. Emily's tears came again, but this time, they weren't just for loss, they were for gratitude, for grace, for the reminder that kindness, no matter how small, never fades into nothing. As she stood there in the golden light, she whispered, "Thank you, Henry." And in that still, glowing cottage by the creek, Emily realized something she would carry for the rest of her life, that true kindness doesn't just change others, it transforms the one who gives it.